Welcome everyone to this panel about the Paris Climate Agreement and the question of which country might fill the void, the leadership void left after the change of government in the US. And since we're of course in New Delhi, so we're talking about whether India might be that country, the opportunities, the challenges, and what impact India's actions might have, not simply on its climate future, but the region. And of course the world. Before we get into this, let me introduce everyone. Right next to me is the Minister of Planning from Bangladesh, Mr. Mustafa Kamal, who's going to talk to us, I hope, a little bit about that question of how India's actions might impact the region, what the regional players are looking for when it comes to climate policy from here, and what they intend to do. Bangladesh, of course, is a country which has already suffered a lot because of climate change. We also have, right at the end, Arnaba Ghosh from the Council on Energy, Environment and Water, who knows policy in this area really, really, really well. So we're going to be turning to him again and again throughout this. Next to him is Vineet Mittal from Avaada, which is a renewable energy company, who knows the private sector side of the story. And I hope he will talk to us about that, as will, I hope, Mr. Puri, Ratul Puri from Hindustan Powerprojects. So let's start with that question of what happens now with India and its position in relation to the Paris Climate Change Agreement, how that's evolved, how that's changed. I don't know if I could begin with you. You've been following this for a long time. You've written lots about it. Can you speak to us a little bit about the evolution of India's position? India, remember, was cast as this spoiler that could mess everything up in the run-up to the Paris talks. Has been cast like that many times in previous years. But things have changed quite significantly in the last few months, at least the narrative. Can you talk to us a little bit about that, how that happened?
Sure, but those changes were not only in the last few months. We've got to take a slightly longer view of history here. Of course, the India pre-Copenhagen in 2009 was an India that was also a very different economy. And it did have very legitimate reasons to argue that it's not the reason why we have a problem of climate change. And while it's going to get impacted, just as Bangladesh is going to get impacted and many countries in South Asia are going to get impacted, the burden of responsibility lays somewhere else. Now remember, very soon after that, in 2010, you had the launch of the National Solar Mission. And at that time, even amongst the sort of planet protectors of the world, or in India, it seemed to be a fool's errand to get onto a solar bandwagon. The narrative was completely around coal and to an extent clean coal. At that time, the benchmark tariff rate set by the regulator was over 17 rupees, and India had less than 18 megawatts of solar power in 2010. Fast forward to 2014, when the new government comes in, we already had a little over 2,000 megawatts. But the big question that the government posed itself and to some of us was, how big can we get on renewables? Which then results in these big targets coming out in 2015 for 175,000 megawatts of solar and wind and biomass and small hydro. Fast forward to late 2015, and you're coming up to the Paris Climate Summit. The India that's coming forward there is not an India that can only say no. It's an India that has already made a strategic decision that it is going to be an enabler of the Paris Climate Agreement. And therefore, on the very first day of the Paris negotiations, unlike other COP events where heads of government come in right at the last day to try and save the day, we had Prime Minister Modi, as well as many other heads of state, determining, and there were 121 countries that decided that an international solar alliance would be launched, with India and France being sort of the leads on it. And that was just one foray into kind of putting your marker on the table that we are here, of course, to get to a negotiated deal, but a lot of the climate action is happening in country through national policy and among countries through parallel plurilateral measures. So the point about this whole story is that I actually find the narrative that after President Trump's election and his decision on 1st of June to withdraw from the Paris Agreement, that there is a leadership vacuum. That assumes that the only leader in the climate world until the 31st of May was the United States of America. But what Paris actually demonstrated, that climate leadership was already diffuse leadership. It was diffuse because you had moments of leadership and actions around climate leadership coming from a number of countries that found it in their own interest to take a lead beyond what was happening within their own countries. And that's not just India's story. It's a story that many other countries can narrate for themselves. But therefore, the story since November 2014, the election, 2016, the election, and certainly since 1st of June, is a little bit of business as usual, with a little bit more thinking around, okay, the negotiations are, of course, going to get much tougher. I was in Paris 3 weeks ago organizing a meeting with OECD countries. I just came back from Paris for International Solar Alliance negotiations. There is, of course, hard negotiations that are going to go on, and that's the nature of things. But I think we should also not keep suggesting that there was only one leader, or once the US left, there's only one other leader, i.e. China. Climate leadership is diffuse, and the sooner we recognize that, the faster we can get real action going in the economy.
Minister, what do you think about that idea that climate leadership should be viewed as something that is diffuse by its very nature, and how do you see India's role now that we've heard from the Trump administration earlier in the summer?
It is a general phenomenon like that, because a country, if it's to act as a leader, in that case, there should be, in the truest sense, a leader. But economically, if we look at the history of India, we will have to appreciate and we'll have to accept that India were a leader. Even when East India Company was formed in 1601, India was number one country in the world. And at that time, they had, under their ownership, about 28% of the world economy. And they retained it for the next 100 years. And at the end of 1700, at that time also they were number one, and they had at that time 23% of the world economy. So if we consider these points, in that case we have reasons to believe that India can act as a leader. But here the question is this, you see, here if you accept anybody as a leader and leaving other major players outside the ambit of this area, in that case it will not work. Here everybody got to be engaged today or tomorrow. So I'm thanking India because initially they were not also party to the agreement. And eventually they have realized that this is an existential issue for the planet. So we have no other options. Here, in order to live in this planet and leave it to our next generations in a beautiful form or in its proper form, we'll have to take care of this climate change impairment related issues. Now, what you see, climate change impact is coming from when? Even if you go back 200 years, there was no discussion even on climate change. It was not needed because the world economy was flat. The growth rate was 0.5%. That means in 100 years you are having a growth of 5%. After the first industrial revolution in 1716, what started in the Europe, and then thereafter when electricity and telephone revolutions all started, we could see there is a sharp differentiation between earliest scenario and then this current scenario. You see, whatever has happened, it happened during the last 200 years. Last 200 years, if we look at, we find in the year 1804, the world had the first 1 billion people. And we had to wait another 130 years. In 1930, the world had 2 billion people, 1930. And then in 1960, we had the 3 billion people. During 2 billion people, I was not born. But while it was 3 billion, I was born.
So we can blame you.
So, and then Between 1960 to 1999, it was a calamitous situation. Human population, it has doubled during this 40 years time. On 12th October 1999, it was 6 billion. So the 7 billion was in 2011. Now, in 2050, it will be 9.4 billion people. However, when it was 1 billion people in exactly 1804, 85% of the people are poor. Even in America, nobody was educated. Out of 100 people, 7 were only diploma holders. Out of 20 people, 19 were living on agriculture, farming. One could do other jobs. So that was the situation. And then, during the last 200 years, the situation changed. Now, after 200 years, when 200 years earlier, 85% people were poor. Now, after 200 years, only 12% people are poor. And what we see, in this period of time, the per capita income of every nation on an average has gone up by 1,000%, saving Japan. In case of Japan, it is 1,500%. Now, to grow that much and raise the living standard of every nations or everybody on this planet, you had to have huge electricity. First source of energy had to be electricity, because otherwise you could not produce enough to support this population. In 1820, in the whole world, there was only 100,000 megawatt of electricity. 100,000. There are all power companies are here. They should know much better than me. In 1820, there were only 100,000 megawatt of electricity. In 1940, it was first 1 million megawatt. 1962, and now it is 5.7 million megawatt. You see, in about 150 years' time, that much amount of electricity had to be produced, and very unfortunately, all were produced from fossil fuel. At that time, nobody could think of other sources. Now, everybody started thinking of other sources, because fossil fuel is no good, because it is emitting a lot of carbon dioxide, and then it is creating a lot of problems. Now, if it is solar, I mean, you are talking about solar, right at the moment it is expensive. But last 12 months, 26% price has come down on solar. So it has been estimated, other things remaining same, given the situation, by the end of 2030, solar will be the cheapest source of energy into this planet. And the other good thing is this: what electricity you gather from solar, I mean from the sun, in 1 minute, it is good enough to meet the entire requirement of this planet for 1 year. 1 minute is equivalent to 1 year.
On that, could I ask Vineet, whose company is into renewable energy and so on, just going back to something the minister said earlier about growth and how economies grew and so on. We're talking about India. How does India balance its commitment, its targets, with making sure the economy continues to grow at the pace that India needs it to grow? And what role do companies like yours have in that? Like, what role does the private sector have in that?
We have been around for last 7 years in this business, and when I used to attend G20 meeting as a part of B20 delegate in 2010, the whole discussion used to be around how to attract private sector investment into clean energy and sustainability, and how to make it commerce and not have subsidies around sustainability. So I think, in my view, what Indian government has managed to do in last 3 years since the new leadership has come is make sustainability a profitable business. Whatever Prime Minister calls is profit ka dhanda. So basically what they have done is they started initially with putting up taxes on coal. So they added up more than $10 on every ton of coal transported from the mine. Second thing they did is that they came out with ambitious goal for solar and wind sector and made it time bound. So they created the size of the industry which attracted global investment, and initially they put viability gap funding, government grant and conducive policy and whole government force around it. So the solar sector is where it gave the lowest tariff in the world, and it is now more competitive than any other form of energy generation, and it largely meets almost half of the peaking requirement of the country. So they made into a big commercial venture. Now it doesn't require any government support, government subsidy. In fact, government has withdrawn income tax benefit and import benefit which it used to give. That's how this industry has become sustainable. And now moving forward, what they are doing is, in my opinion, the three large emitter has been public and private transport, energy generation, the power plants. They contribute almost 75% of the global greenhouse generation, and third is the industry. And to incentivize and reduce the carbon footprint further, they come out with the e-vehicle policy and became one of the few countries which said that by 2030 we would change the whole landscape of the how the car operates in this country. And to demonstrate their commitment, they used their earlier policy to create the marketplace by buying 10,000 plus e-vehicle on day one for the government department itself. So what we are seeing is that government is putting its money where its mouth is. They understand it very well, and so the sustainability and environment friendliness is not just the part and parcel of these two things on transport and energy generation, but to encourage industry, they have improved their environmental norms a lot, which in some time makes our industry less competitive. So I think the government is also thinking about incentivizing in some other ways those industry which get impacted. Plus, what we are seeing in the solid waste management and municipal waste, which was another large pollutant causing force, there are a lot of campaign around that. So Prime Minister has put his own credibility around such Bharat campaign, which he passionately drives throughout the country. Wherever he goes, he becomes the role model around that. He's putting his reputation at stake at every forum by articulating India's commitment, irrespective of what the biggest polluter like US and others are doing. It says he's more accountable and responsible to its own citizen and to the world, and he's demonstrating that global leadership, whether it's in the form of International Solar Alliance, whether it's in the form of creating the marketplace for sustainable investment. So I think whether we admit it or not, India is on path to anchor this through his personal zeal and commitment towards cleaner and greener India.
What do you make of that, Ratul? This idea that the government is putting its money where its mouth is?
I think I would absolutely second everything that that Vineet said. We have to recognize the fact that India is a poor country. We have to recognize the fact that India is developing. It's a growing economy. It's a developing economy. Nonetheless, I think we have to recognize the courage it took on the part of Prime Minister Modi to come in and set an agenda to build out 175 gigawatts of renewables. It's not a small amount of renewable. It was one of the most ambitious renewable programs out there. And this was being done at a point in time where India did not really actually need that energy. So for megawatt, unit for unit, as India goes in and absorbs that renewable energy, and India has paid a price for it because it has taken out existing generation capacity that was already underbuilt or is underbuilt. And if you look at the latest economic survey, volume 2 of the latest economic survey that was just published in September, I think that has got an entire section that is dedicated to the economic cost that India is actually paying for this program. And we can look at the headline rate for renewable, which because yesterday's auction was 2 rupees 60 paisa or $5 a kilowatt hour, but in reality the cost of that renewable for India is much higher. So I would say for a country like India to take this, to take the decision to go out and build 175 gigawatts of renewables, shows leadership. I think that's a demonstration of leadership because you are putting your money where your mouth is. And also, I believe, the International Solar Alliance and the India taking a leadership position around trying to create such a multilateral body also demonstrates the mindset and the thought leadership coming from Prime Minister Modi around, this entire space and this entire area. So I certainly think India is committed down this path. India is going to go down this path, and which is important both for India, but also I think important for the world because, we have a billion people in India, and India is going to go through a path of rapid economic growth, and it can go down a carbon intensive path of rapid economic growth or a carbon or a relatively less carbon intensive path. And so the path India is choosing, whether it's around energy efficiency, we shouldn't forget energy efficiency. It is a less it's less obvious than thousands of megawatts and hundreds of millions of dollars and billions of dollars investment, but energy efficiency is another path India is pushing. And in small ways taking a lead, with the LED program, which has been tremendously successful, and with a number of other programs, I think India certainly is taking a leadership position in this space.
Arnab, if I could, so we've talked a lot about India's leadership and the things that are happening, but can India really replace? I mean, I know you said that there's diffuse leadership, but there's also these financial commitments that the US had under Paris that it was going to make, which to help other countries mitigate the effects of climate change.
Sure.
That's now gone. Yeah. Does India have the appetite, do you think, to step up to that? Or, what happens to that?
Short answer, Nikhil, is no.
Right.
And long answer is it shouldn't have to, because not just because it doesn't have the money, also because we need many different colors of money for the problem we are facing. Let's just take a step back. While, Ratul, Vineet and I have, talked about the renewable story in India, the energy efficiency, LED, Swachh Bharat, etc., and you will see pockets of, islands of initiatives and success in many other countries. The problem of climate change is still a very massive one, and we are not even marginally there yet. If you add up everything that the countries promised, especially the three biggest polluters, historical and current, China, United States and the European Union, then on the 12th of December 2015, when Paris Agreement was signed, the sum total of those meant that these three regions by 2030 would consume 95% of the carbon space available for the entire world for the entire century. Right? This is the impact. So basically what you've done is you've created a 5% room for about 90% of the world's population, right? About 80% of the world's population, right? Through the Paris Agreement, right? So we are nowhere there yet. But what Paris does is it sets in motion a different direction of travel, because for the first time after more than 25 years of negotiations, you had all countries, big or small, saying we are going to do something about it. Now this then brings me back to this issue of money. The $100 billion that was promised by the developed countries as part that would accumulate by 2020 is pittance. To get to 100,000 megawatts of solar in India, we need $100 billion of debt alone. Right? India does not have a debt market deep enough to service that. Therefore, we need large institutional capital to flow into India. This is one country's, one program's financial needs. Right? So you're never going to be able to solve the climate problem by writing, traditional development assistance checks. What is needed then is, if the United States has exited the Paris Agreement, it still has to ask itself two questions. For its money, where is it going to get maximum returns? And secondly, can it combine its money with other people's money for even higher returns? Right? today the Indian, as both Vineet and Ratul were mentioning, we have a massive market, but for renewables. But understand, it is the largest market for renewables in emerging economies that works on market principles. It's very important to get this right. You will get bids for solar in Saudi Arabia or in Dubai or in Abu Dhabi, which are half of India's values. But that's artificial because your cost of finance is effectively zero. The land is a desert, it's effectively zero. Right? We've looked at the tariffs. You look at China, you have a different degree of subsidization that's happening. You look at Germany's or Spain's or Italy's initial renewables growth, it came on the back of government subsidies. In southern European countries, they ran out of the money. Germany effectively then subsidized the rest of the world's technology cost curve decline. So India is presenting a market opportunity to get market returns on a massive scale, right? But the other flip side of that is adaptation. One of the reasons India came to the table is that when you actually count the rupees, in the last 5 years, we've been averaging about $92 billion of spending on what could be considered adaptation-related activities through Indian money. And we've been facing, on average, $5 to $6 billion of loss and damage due to climate-related extreme events. Which means that a country like India is spending its own money or losing its own money to the order of about $98 to $100 billion. The same amount of money that was promised for the entire world. When a country is already ending up suffering this loss, it behoves it to come up to the table and say, you know, we need to be part of this solution and we need to crowd in different colors of money.
Minister, well then, how do you view this from Bangladesh's perspective? I hate to make another representative of the Indian government, but India's not going to give the money. So,
and I'm not.
So how do you view it from Bangladesh's point of view?
No, you see,
the loss of that financing.
first of all, certain things to be clarified. Some of the discussions, they have said India is a poor country. I really don't know where from we can gather this sort of information. To me, the statistics I have the correct numbers. India, see, because we view a country from the point of economics, there are two ways of assessing a country. One is done on purchasing power parity method, and the other one is nominal account method. Now, in terms of purchasing power parity method, India is already second largest economy in the whole world. Their GDP size is $8.7 trillion. And if the other method is nominal account, their GDP size is $2.3 trillion, and they are standing in the whole world on this basis as well. It is 7th. So they are either number 3 or number 7th. If we say it's a poor country, in that case I think it is it's not a good gesture to pass on the remarks onto the country. India is already, as I said, India was a rich country and India is now also a rich country. The projection is this: by the year 2030, India, in terms of purchasing power parity method, they will be number 1 country, and by the year 2035, they will be number 2nd country in the other method also. So there is no reason to believe that India is a poor country. And again, I think we have assessed the total requirement, how much money is needed to transform ourselves from the fossil fuel to the renewables. It is not required for the developed country. Developed country, they are capable enough of funding themselves. It is required only for the only for the least developed country or the developing countries like Bangladesh. Now, $100 billion are necessary for every year until 2030. It's not a huge amount of money. I think here, funding is not important. Finance is not important that way. The leadership, if anybody has to assume this position, in that case they will have to be very serious. They will have to show their keenness, which India is already started showing. Initially, they are not a signatory, as I've said. Now they are a signatory. And in between, they have taken certain initiatives which has inspired the rest of the world. 792 billion bulbs they have transformed from the conventional system to the LED bulbs now. So there they will be saving about at least 20 megawatt of electricity. So this is, I mean, it's a this is a small example I'm telling you. But in the same way, the nuclear power, electricity from nuclear, India was having 9 megawatt of electricity. Now it has gone up to 29, something like that. As I have read in the newspaper. So in every areas, they are showing their intent, and intent is very positive. I think they can, along with other Asian partners, because Asia is the largest, you see. We are having 60% of the world population. And I think if India assumes this responsibility, in that case it is possible. If America is not coming forward in that case, Asia can at least partially solve this issue. But at the end of the day, eventually we will have to have everybody with us. Gentlemen, you see, in 1922, there was a book written by W.J. Bells. He said very clearly one thing in his book in 1922, about how many? 95 years back. He said, adapt or perish. Now or ever. This is nature's inexorable imperative. We have no other choice. We have no second option left. We will have to save this planet. This planet is subjected to threat of extinction. I think we are here to reaffirm the whole world that whoever, either in Bangladesh or in Texas or in South Carolina or in Miami, wherever it is, whoever is suffering, we have to reaffirm it to them that we are with them. And we are here to reiterate that in their journey, and right at the moment what they are suffering, they are not alone. There has to be a solution, and we are here to bring in those solutions. Gentlemen, all of you are the harbinger of changes in the society. Society cannot suffer like this. Bangladesh, last 7 months, it is incredible. I have never seen in my life that we are having rains. 7 months we are having rains. We are an exporter of rice. Just the other day we are exporting rice. Now we are an importer of rice. So this phenomenon or this scenario cannot sustain. We'll have to have a solution. And I think we need a leader. And India should take the lead. If India takes the lead, the others will follow. I'm sure about that. India is having good relationship with everybody, and India is not a poor country. If India is poor country, in that case, others' position, I don't know where then we stand. So my idea is very clear. We have no second option left. We will have to have this planet in its position. You see now, very, very dangerous news are coming in front of us.
If I could ask Ratul then, that given what the minister said, given how important all this is, and all of you talked earlier about everything that India is doing and the pace at which things are improving, are you concerned about the election in 2019 and what that might do? I mean, this is a democracy after all, or other elections, that all of that could colour. You know, we're talking now at a time when GDP growth has fallen. Are you concerned that all of that government enthusiasm might go?
GDP growth has fallen by only 0.1%. Is it what is this? This is because before that, in 2007, you are growing 9%. From 9, it has come down to now little less than 6%. Same way, even China was growing at 14%. Now China is coming less than 7%. So it is everywhere. It is the rule of law of economics. It happens, you know. So, however,
I think, I think there's always the risk. I think you cannot rule out the political risk that exists, when there's a regime change. If there is a regime change, I think I said that wrongly. I think if there is a regime change, there would be, there could be a change in policy. I think that goes with, that goes with the territory. But I think in the path that India has committed itself down, I think is an inevitable path, especially around the renewable piece. I think there are many other paths to climate change. I think there's the whole transportation sector and what we need to do on the transportation sector. But I think what's at question is not the eventual end point, but the curve to get there. So how, what is the rate and pace of adoption? So could we see a slowdown in the rate and pace of adoption? That is possible if there's a regime change. But I think the eventual endpoint will be gotten to. Similar to when you look at the entire transportation sector, I think it is going to, everybody today says it is going to undergo a fundamental shift. It's only now what's the shape of the curve and when do you eventually get there? I mean, when will traditional transportation, at least personal and commercial transportation, turn towards electric? Or will it turn towards electric? I think that is an eventuality that will happen. It is just when we will get there.
What about you, Arnab? What do you think about the political risk with climate policy in India?
Look, Nikhil, I think we have to definitely be cognizant of political risk anywhere, in any democracy, for big, bold moves.
As we learned with the US.
As we learned with the US. But at the same time, we are not running our elections or competing in the elections based on India's, climate-friendly position or not. It's not an election issue. What is an election issue? Access to electricity, access to clean water, access to easy credit for farmers, some degree of predictability of farmers' livelihoods. That's what's really driving. So from that point of view, then the real question, if I may rephrase your question, should be, are we worried that our actions will dilute the political dividends that any government, the current or an opposition one that is hoping to come into power, might observe if it were to push these policies? Or would these policies help them win more votes based on any one of these metrics, right? And I think where I am less worried about is not about the targets, it's about the way actions have taken place. I think India, I was just discussing this in Paris yesterday, I think India has begun to learn scale. We compare India and China and, we don't have 10,000 people sitting in one factory stitching t-shirts and shoes or making supercomputers. Yeah, we haven't got that kind of scale. But we have begun to understand scale of service delivery through the state, right? LPG as a cooking fuel was introduced in India in the late 60s. In the first 50 years, we had about 120 million connections. In the last 2.5 years, we have 70 million additional connections. The direct benefit transfer scheme for LPG subsidies is now the world's largest cash transfer program, using advanced biometrics, opening of bank accounts, and the delivery of cash into the accounts of these people. LED light bulbs, as mentioned, 265 million light bulbs distributed, not for free, but in a installment-based payment scheme. I think all of this is basically demonstrating that there is a willingness and perhaps a hitherto undiscovered capacity of the state to operate at scale. Now, if you do that, then you begin to combine your story around climate change or your actions or your promises in international negotiations with the actions on the ground. So take renewables. In the last 4 or 5 years, the employment of Coal India, the largest coal producer in the world, fell from about 390,000 people to about 350,000 people. My institution, CEW, in our latest, we do annual surveys of jobs being created in renewables. Our estimate is that you get a workforce of 330,000 people with 175 gigawatts of renewables. And that's just a flaw, right? So the numbers are comparative. Right? One is a declining industry, but we think of them as this is the veto point. These 330,000 people, 350,000 coal miners and other workforce can hold the country to hostage with regards to its energy transition. Or you can think there is a political dividend of the additional 330,000 people who are going to get employed, right? Obviously, this is nowhere near our employment requirements. We need to generate 12 million, 10 to 12 million jobs a year. But the political economy can play out either way. And the same applies to the United States. The very states within the United States where you have coal in trouble, you have more jobs being generated in renewables. So if Mr. Trump wants to respond to his constituents and wants to come back to power in 2020, then he should actually invest in this very space that's creating jobs.
Vineet, what about you? What do you think the broader question of what risks do you see to India achieving its goals? Not just political, but what's the primary risk? What are you concerned about? We've talked about lots of things that are going right.
So if you largely see on the government's announced program, I don't see any major hurdle. What they have done is, like if there was a financing risk, they got banks to commit to fund it. They got transmission utilities to ensure that the transmission is in place. They got states to commit that land is in place. So I think they did a very comprehensive, thorough job of doing this. And what I see as a citizen of this country, that country is taking leadership through role model. We are trying to give the message to the rest of world that you could be the responsible world citizen and you don't have to emulate the developed nations of polluting and running away. So I don't see any retraction back on clean energy initiative because these are commercially now more viable than conventional side. So there is no looking back. And second thing, as Minister was pointing out, weather pattern change in Bangladesh. Now in Delhi in the last 3 years, I've been talking to journalists since last 8-9 years to talk about right balance on 3 E's, which I call about environment, energy requirement, and economic growth, and the pollution should be the front page story. Fortunately, it is becoming a front page story about weather scenario in Delhi, Bombay. So I don't think I tend to disagree with Arnubha that it will not be an election issue. I think the youth in India would demand cleaner environment, and it will anyone who is more friendly towards the environment will have more brownie points. Those issues which he highlighted will be there. So I think it's becoming a mainstream issue now that people want to breathe fresh air, drink clean water, and live in a cleaner place. So I think India is fully committed, and I hope it inspires rest of the world to do their bit, and US changes its stance fairly soon. And on job creation, he was very conservative. Actually, the amount of ancillary job which gets created, he has taken only stable job at operational level.
Direct jobs.
Yeah, direct jobs at but when you set up the plant, like in my plant of 150 megawatt, we were employing close to 800 people at the peak, and so it has created a huge job requirement, and we do a lot of things manually in India in construction space, and it complements with the farming community. So actually it's a monsoon, you don't do much construction, so farmers goes away to his village to farm. So it's actually a very complementary revenue source to our major community. So I would say that it's going to, people in this business have not come only for social venture. They are making good money by doing good for the society, and I think our country has shown that path to the rest of the world, that if you do it with the right policies, right framework, right intention, you could make it successful. So like Anubha was saying, Germany subsidized the cost of technology. I think India showed the rest of the world the most optimal cost to deliver clean energy in a sustainable fashion.
So on that very positive note, we've got 15 minutes. Any questions for the panel? Anyone? No? Yeah, go.
Hi, Rishi Anger from CNN Money. I want to ask, just want to get everyone's take on how the Indian government has and many other countries have also put out are making a big push into electric vehicles, and India set a target of all electric vehicles by 2030. How realistic do you think that is, and what needs to be done? What more needs to be done to kind of achieve targets like that?
Do you want to go or no?
I'll comment on it in terms of one big component of electric vehicles, which is the battery, right? Compared to an internal combustion engine vehicle, the cost of the battery is the substantial cost of an electric vehicle. The rest is, software, and then there's a little bit of advanced materials that makes the actual car. If we did achieve that target, what it means is that in 2030, the demand for batteries in India for road transport would be 5 times the global demand for batteries today. Right? This is just going to be India's demand. Right? Now, batteries are not, the Duracell ones you put in. You've got there's a range of battery technologies. The lithium ion is not the only game in town. But in all of them, the advanced electrochemistry implies that you're talking about new types of minerals that we don't have easy access to. Okay, so if I were to take a step back, I wouldn't comment on the electric vehicle target, so to speak. I'll talk about the strategic thinking India needs to have around critical mineral resources. Last year, we had done the first such analysis, and this work has been done only in the United States and Europe outside of India, and CEW did this work on examining 47 different minerals that impact our industrial growth. And we identified 12 as the most critical, and nearly all of them we are entirely import dependent. So if you want to do any kind of next generation advanced manufacturing, whether it's EVs, whether it is new types of solar panels, whether it's new types of wind turbines, whether it's new forms of manufacturing process altogether, the technology clusters that you're looking at, industrial biotech, nanotech, micro nano electronics, photonics, and advanced materials, all require a completely different thinking around the stuff that goes into making stuff. So I would urge the government of India to work with other advanced economies that are interested in developing a global supply chain that works on market principles for critical minerals. Otherwise, the wars around oil that we had in the 20th century, we will have, definitely wouldn't predict wars, but I will definitely predict deep political conflict around access to critical minerals across the world. And this is something we need to keep in mind.
Would either one of you on the electric vehicle target, anything?
I agree with Anubha. I think he has summarized the scenario very well, and few of the countries who have access to those natural resources, we have seen the pricing of those minerals going up in significant proportion in just last 12 months. But at the same time, I'm very optimistic on advancement in material science, and have been attending a lot of the discussion with Resolve at Resolve group at MIT. And I see that if the market is created, which is so big, there will be huge innovation. India is filled with bright talent, and I would not be surprised if a substitute is found. Like recently I met someone who is making batteries from dust, though he has not scaled it up, but it's currently non-commercially available, but it's working. So there are technologies which are getting developed, and if the market gets created well in the right spirit with the right technologies, and ancillary market around it also gets developed at the same time, I think India would become the role model in this sector as well.
I believe, I mean, again, along the lines of what Vineet said, I believe innovation will solve a lot of the challenges around key supply chains. And so, I think we are going down an inevitable path, even on the EV side, the same inevitability that, you see on renewable, I think, especially on solar, I think that you're seeing the same path on the EV side. And so I think it is something that's real, and it has massive geopolitical implications. It has massive, implications for the world. But it is certainly something that's happening, and I think that is very, very positive for the climate, positive for the environment.
Minister, would you like to add something? It's an Indian policy.
You see, last week I was in London. I saw a number of electric vehicles on the roads. So it is my strong belief from the recent past, you see. In the last 20 years, whoever are in front of me, none of you can say that for any particular product, price has gone up. It is either stable or it is going down. So you see, it depends on the productivity, level of productivity. When demand is there, you'll have to increase your productivity. And when productivity will be increased, based on commercial expediency, the price will come down, and it will be within the within the buying limit of everybody. So I am sure. Again, I am saying about energy, about electric vehicles. I have said price will come down, and materials will be available. Different materials will be available through R&D. Number of materials will be available, not only one or two. So the same way I'm saying, the solar energy, you see, I'm sure in 2030 all of you will remain in this world, and you will see solar energy will be funding your other unprofitable or non-profitable industries. Thank you. And I'm again thanking all of you, sir, because I have heard all of your sentiments, all of your views, and I will carry back those views, and then in my country I will try to also at least do something based on your suggestions and proposals. So all of you are invited to Bangladesh. Had you been to Bangladesh?
Yes, earlier this year.
Earlier this year. So come end of this year. Why not end of this year again? So I am inviting all of you on behalf of 160 million Bangladeshis. You are most welcome there. And we have cricket like IPL. It will start from the 2nd of November and it will continue until 14th of December. So if you come during that time, you'll find me there. I will take you to the grounds whenever you want to.
I think we have
I was with cricket, you know that. I was the president of Bangladesh Cricket Board, and I was also the president of International Cricket Council. And then I resigned during the last World Cup. Maybe you know the reason by now. So, however, I'm thankful to you. I'm grateful to you, and then it was a wonderful moment for me to be here.
I think we have one
listen
more.
To your voices.
We have one more question.
Yeah. So in terms of cumulative emissions since the Industrial Revolution, USA and the European Union have obviously been the highest polluters in terms of cumulative emissions. So how do you think geopolitical power can be leveraged to actually pressure the USA to actually do something? Because if there's one hole in the boat, the whole boat sinks. So how can geopolitical power be leveraged to actually convince USA that it is the biggest polluter and that its action has repercussions over the whole world?
In America, how many places on the same day the places are going underwater now? So the solutions are coming up from particularly from those areas, who are now not accepting. They can't be away from the problem for a long time. They will have to accommodate themselves. They will have to address these issues. Why this? Why it is happening? You see, 5 countries are producing. They are the largest emitters. Of course, India is also there. America, China, Brazil, India, and Japan. They are the 5 countries. They are emitting 55% of the total. You know, so these countries, they should come forward and they should help this planet. You know, for the cause of humanity. I'm sure America will also. Time, it's a question of time. And this gentleman, you know, about whom you're not mentioning his name, he's very much flexible. Whenever he says something in the morning, he changes his mind in the afternoon. So you're not to worry, you know, you don't need to worry about it. So when Texas is hit, when California is hit, when South Carolina is hit, Hawaii is also hit. Every area is going underwater. Then people will go to, I think, and I think time will be the healer of every point.
You touched on this a little bit earlier, Arnava, when you were answering a question.
Well, I think the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change was signed in 1992. Until 2014, we adopted exactly what you're suggesting, that, you know, let's embarrass the biggest polluters into becoming willing signatories to something. And it didn't really work because we had that top-down approach to try and solve the climate problem. And I'm not discounting the ethical basis of that argument. I'm simply questioning the instrumental efficacy of that argument. Now, in 2015, 2 other things happened. Number one is that you began to see that there is, as Vineet and Ratul have consistently mentioned this evening, that there are economic returns to be made on this, right? So for the biggest capitalist nation on the planet, if they want to miss the economic returns from the greener economy, so be it. Someone else is going to succeed. That's number one. But the other thing that happened, which is why I talked about the International Solar Alliance, mission innovation, Bill Gates has driven breakthrough energy ventures. What is it? What are we trying to do through all of these ventures? They're not traditional intergovernmental initiatives. It's really about looking at the subnational level and non-state actors. So you can divide up the world and say 4 or 5 countries are the biggest emitters, or you could equally divide up the markets and say about 80 companies account for 90% plus of global emissions historically and currently. Now, investors, whether they are the BlackRocks of the world or whether they are individual investors, they are also beginning to vote with their money. The reason they're beginning to vote with their money is because they worry about the non-linear risks that climate change imposes to large infrastructure investment. And they are therefore forcing the ExxonMobils of the world and others to disclose what climate risks they face. So these 2 things, the general economic returns from investing in new emerging greener technologies and markets, and a shift towards focusing on companies and subnational actors, give us at least 2 additional levers to the overall ethical point that you've already made. So we should keep making that point, that you created the problem, don't run away from your responsibility. But now we have 2 more weapons at hand.
Great.
I have a good example on this. In US, what is happening, large corporates are adopting the change.
Yes.
So even in their buying pattern, I'll give you an example of Walmart. They are saying that unless you are a fully sustainable factory, I'm not going to buy rugs from you. So they have built their own standard, which is better than some of the IFC and World Bank laid standard in selecting their partners. So the behavior change is happening because their consumers are demanding. So if Walmart doesn't do it, people are moving to Target. So what is going to happen is that the equilibrium is going to come, because whatever the political leadership talks, none of us have right to deprive our next generation of good environment. So that fact remains, and most of the humans love their kids more than themselves. So I'm very optimistic with that selfish interest, world is going to become a better place to live.
Also, I think at a certain level, the economics come back into play. And so, as you have multiple countries going out and driving initiatives around climate change, you start to see scale in it. And then, as economics come into play across different technologies, I think the cost of that eventually will come down far enough so that you will see adoption, even in the United States or in other countries that may believe that they do not need to. That they are not conforming with their commitments under the Paris Accord. So I think the economics themselves can sometimes become compelling enough that it is economically the most efficient path for you to go down, as the ecological or the environmental path is also the most economically sensible path.
So on that very optimistic note, I think
only 1 minute. See, I'm sorry. I've taken a number of times the microphone, It is my belief, if you could change the name of the nomenclature, the nomenclature, instead of Paris Climate Agreement or Climate Accord, if the name could have been American Climate Accord, in that case I think things would have been easier, I think it is only because of the name itself. So it will not be sustained. I'm sure about that.
The Trump Climate Accord.
there you go. Well, thank you everyone for coming, and thank you all for your contribution.
Thank you.
Great.